Good evening, everybody. System Chalk here with the 158th episode of our first run through the House of Light expansion for Book of Hours, playing as the archaeologist. We're just finishing up leveling up the consulting engineer to open up the impermeable cell. We'll still talk to Denzel, but really a lot of this is going to be about preparation for a potential Numa at the end of the season. We've already finished the studies that I wanted to do, so we wound up moving Desires and Dissolutions up to 5. There's a couple of things that are nice about that. One thing I'll just draw your attention to is that on the to-read list, we've got The Voyages of Furnish and of Oriel, which is an 18-moon mystery. That can go towards sea stories. We also have the Karashim Portalon. So I believe between those two, I don't recall if it's 3 or 4, so we could technically go anywhere from, if there were 2, that could be to 5, and if there were 3, that could take us up to 6, or I guess 7 if there were 3 in the voyages. And then we've got the Book of the White Cat. Now, Watchman's Paradoxes, actually, I don't know if we've determined. I think I did say I was going to put those in 4, but let me just double check that is not me making an assumption here. Watchman's Paradoxes are indeed scheduled for 4. So that one really should be seen a little bit more as something free for the Lantern and Sky. In fact, really, I should probably just move that over now. Well, then again, I don't really have a lot of free. Well, no, I got a little bit. But yeah, I do still sort of have my work cut out for me in terms of allocating all. Actually, I can do a little bit. So we do have some more VAC texts we can juggle around. One of the complications that's come up over the course of the playthrough now is that not all of the skills I can generate are equally useful. So basically any lantern and moth should be treated as non-existent for the purposes of leveling. Now that doesn't mean, so for instance in the case of the Twin Serpent Tantra, I'd want to find something with knock that I can use to level up, and in the case of the Book of Masks we'd want to apply something with heart. And then with the Book of the White Cat, we would want to find something with Sky. So again, that's not to imply that those lessons are completely free, but definitely I want to kind of draw those down. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter when I draw those down, but they've ceased to have any direct use towards putting things on the Tree of Wisdoms like I've been aiming towards. Which is fine. It does mean that the sun's weakness is becoming a bit less useful for me. So once Grail is sort of out in terms of something that can contribute useful lessons, that will limit my use of the Newman. But until that happens, I will happily grab it. In autumn, before the real chill comes, Trumpeter's Lily still flourishes, a glorious efflorescence of sunset orange. Honey-Scar Jasmine, like a dart of sweet fire. Gather the scented blossoms of the fragrant chalice. Vegetables for everyone. There we go. Don't have a whole lot that I want to do with those, so. Now, I suppose if I feel like it... Oh, that's right. I was going to work out the salon. So let me take a quick minute here with my notes. There's actually going to be a few things that I erase as well. So I've been making some small notes here in terms of potential uses for my interesting. I've been making some notes here in terms of people who would be sorry, I'm noticing a lot of old notes here, so I want to try and keep things reasonably up to date. Yeah, so I've got a list of people who could potentially fit into the Lighthouse Institute, but I haven't made a firm decision yet. I also have a few people who I just haven't invited as often for the Lighthouse Institute. So let's see. I think I'll invite Peter and Coquille again. And actually, if that's the case, I wonder, do we have Aaron Peel? Be surprised if we didn't. Interesting. Okay, so we've got Serena, Fraser, Arthur Moore, Olympi, Douglas, Coquille, Hokebald, Yvette, Daymare, Zachary, Father Stanislav, Corso, Kaima, Agdistis, Eason. Very interesting. Because I could have sworn we've had... Huh. I'm trying to think of the specific instance in which I would have had him, but yeah, okay. Evidence seems to point to the contrary. So yeah, what I was trying to do was have like a balance of sort of suppression figures and all right, so in that case we'll do Douglas. Which I guess means Wakefield. This is starting to look a little bit like one of my usual salons, which is a little disappointing. And then Corso does feel a little risky. Could do Daymare, but that'll force me to do something like game chips, and I don't know if I've got the dripping for that. Although that doesn't rule out me making the dripping. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do, actually. Okay. So if it's game chips... And then we'll do marinated roast beef for Coquille. For Agdistis... I think he wants heart. So that would be a free one. I won't even try to do anything new for Douglas. He'll be the pudding as usual, so orange jumble. And then for Wakefield, you know, pale marrow would actually be just the thing. All right, so this actually gives me a few things that I can play around with here. So what I will do, let's... So for one, we'll open up the sack of vegetables. The fete won't help me with cooking. So for that one, I will somehow use it to make an Eigengrau when all is said and done. Just trying to think how I can pull that off. Well, it doesn't have to be at... Yeah, this won't do. This is a little too good in the other direction. What I'm really looking to do here is just somehow add a sites and say, oh, you know what? This will be the one. Okay, well the orange jumble should be a piece of cake. Not quite what I wanted to do, but fair enough. Right, we also need the spicing. Alright, make an orange jumble. It's a little more involved than I thought. So that's Douglas taken care of. Wow, I've really not left myself a whole lot of options here. So let me just go to my Excel spreadsheet for recipes. The challenge with the heart side of the equation is that there's actually just a heck of a lot that you can do. I would prefer not to... I'd prefer not to give up too much to make that happen. So for instance, I could do a roast pheasant, but it's like, really, do I want to give up a whole pheasant? I mean, I guess there could be worse. I'm just trying to think what else would I do as an alternative. Vegetable stew would be another example. Although in that case, it would probably be... I mean, I guess one thing I could do is if we had something that wasn't a pale marrow, I could just bake that. Or alternatively, I can do 2 beef meals and then, use the dripping from that. I'm not crazy about that option, though. So I think what I will do here is I will, if it's a pale marrow, I'll make vegetable stew. And if it's not a pale marrow, I will use whatever marrow comes out to, I'll cook that. But it does mean that I do need to wait. Actually, it means I'm probably going to wind up wasting some of these elements of the soul, but... With Keeper level Forge, Iotic Essence is a precursor to the great ink called Orpiment Exultant. With Keeper level Lantern, it can become Xanthotic Essence instead. Alright, down to the Grussians. This has boosted their aspects appropriately. So we can talk with Denzel for a bit. Speak to Denzel, he might even reply. The Impermeable Cell. A sign outside this cell reads, "Warning, not to be spoken with nor looked upon. The protections that still hang in the air lend force to the injunction." Trying to think how else I want to use my remaining minute. Fresh and hearty. Well, I'm so glad we did this. That was my bad. I definitely should have... Alright, a dark marrow. So we don't have that much time left, so I will... That'll be for Peter Ictistus. Good news is, I have lots of vegetables I can examine. A golden marrow. In Brandkrug, they take their marrows seriously. This is accounted a beauty among its kind. So this would be a decent alternative for... Actually, I could cook this, and then that would be one that would work for Douglas. But at this point here, I have more elements of the soul than I have opportunities to cook. So this is a marrow, promising. As I used to say in my youth, the day is done and so am I, but I've earned my pay. So I should basically treat this like I've got 1 round and 1 round left. Help with letters. I could offer help with correspondence and arithmetic. There's no school in Brandkrug, and not everyone here knows their letters. Just as a side, I'll slightly prioritize the whist here. It probably won't come up, but just on the odd chance it does. Pale marrow is the one that I wanted for Wakefield. Alright, fine. Just let it hang out on the bridge for a bit. He does a lot with silence, this man. So we'll just hang out for a little bit here because we do want to feed the dog. It's nice to know I can get scent from the vegetables. The only real drawback here is that it takes the health to get the vegetables, and then it takes the element of the soul to eat the vegetables. So it's 2 that are given up rather than just the 1 for using the watchful potted plant. And obviously, given the number of times that I've like quote unquote wasted elements of the soul at the end of the day, I really don't need to be worrying about that, but it's one of the reasons why I keep going back to the watchful potted plant. The Colonel's lessons and the Lionsmith's lessons have been unkindly and reductively rendered as stab versus thump. Hungry dog, a bottomless and reproachful appetite, but such a good bottomless appetite. And the invincible audacity. A general says, when I make the right choice, I win. An illuminate says, when I win, I determine which choice was the right one. Natalia Brulot, 6 edge, 3 forge, 3 lantern. Brought to you by the power of dog. Alright, so this does cut one of my plans short. I mean, I can not feed the dog, but that seems unkind. Trist is the later one, so... It is carnivorous, so... Satisfy this creature's appetite. The surface of the substance is difficult to resolve, almost as if it weren't there at all. So put that on the bridge, and there's the orange jumble. So it'll be winter. Let's do refectory. All right. So I want to make sure that I marinate the roast beef. That's because that's the biggest dependency right now. So marinate a joint of beef, an ingredient for a higher purpose. Okay, now we just wait out the clock. The occupant of this cell could not be allowed fresh air and exercise. It could not have reasonably expected to leave this cell ever again, even while it wore human shape. But it could not be confined forever. In the end, somehow, it found its way into the walls. So, desiccated witchworms, nasty little things, but almost safe when they're this dead. Whispering sand, white silver sand in which the voice of the waves lingers. Stargall ink, an ink traditionally but only rarely made with meteoric iron, a minor ink of power. A midnight mark, a blemish left on a page or a skin by a careful incision or a judicious sting to preserve a little of this power of night. Sorry, a little of the power of night. And that's it. So no books or anything like that for us, but obviously some repairs. All right, so at some point we'll want to open up the sagging dock, and then we will be able to focus sort of on these lower levels, but clearly not something that's going to be worked out today. I don't think I'm going to be able to talk with Denzel again today, so this should be it in terms of memories. Night has fallen, dawn will come soon. And we'll see what the weather brings. Bake a dark stuffed marrow. This was a marrow with secrets. Now it's a dish for misties. An afternoon spent profitably, reading newspapers to the curious, writing affectionate letters for the lonely, steering farmers through the requirements of the Ministry of Agriculture. Tangy with the harbingers of a roastful destiny. A full belly makes a helpful friend. All right, so we've got everything set. If it is Numa, there's no requirement that I send Hobson off in Numa, but it felt appropriate. And then I will also be taking care of whatever leveling I want to do. Daybreak, memories fade, assistance departs, but the soul is refreshed. I've carried a memory like a flambeau safe through the mazes of night. This will complete once dawn has come. It is winter. All right. So it's worth saying. So what was I a little worried about when it came to the potential for Numa? Basically, one of the things that I'm going to want to do during Numa is I'm going to want to break one of the. I'm pretty sure it's the level 5 skill. So this would be Path and Pilgrim, Lockworks and Clockworks, Coil and Chasm, Oranoscopy, or now Desires and Dissolutions. This is one of the reasons, by the way, why I specifically put effort into leveling up one or the other rather than doing both in terms of that leveling. So one of the things that will be most helpful in terms of redistributing some of those lessons will be to commit more skills to the Tree of Wisdoms, because that gets me elements of the soul. And I've already given a few examples in terms of how I've allocated a few things in the past. So for instance, here we've got Ithistry, so that'll be glassblowing, bells and braziers, and Glazierian lightsmithing, which I think we are actually ready if we haven't already. Yeah, so those are basically ready to be committed at any time. Now I'll contrast that with something like Illumination. Now this is a little bit of a weird one just because I've got other places where I can put them. But the ones that I've made some notes for here, Menascate Reflections at 3, Watchman's Paradox is at 4, Applebright Euphonies at 5, Purifications and Exaltations at 6, Preliminal Meter at 7, Disciplines of the Scar at 8, and Transformations and Liberations at 9. So you may be wondering where did this come from? Because a couple of them I've definitely said, okay, this will be the top level one. So for instance, like Sights and Sensations. And that's largely through a process of elimination. But it seems like Illumination definitely has a fully worked out plan, despite the fact that there's only 2 languages applied to it right now. And really what happened here was, I think at some point, I don't think it was Purifications and Exaltations, but I think maybe Applebright Euphonies. Anyways, I noticed that I had a range of 3 to 6, and there's a couple of them which wound up being at the 6 level. So, like, I think what maybe happened here was I'd said, I think I'd realized transformations and liberations would have gone to Ithistry, except that I think I'd already worked out something in Ithistry. So it's like, okay, well, we'll put transformations and liberations into illumination. And, it's at 9, so that's fine there. And then Disciplines of the Scar was definitely one that I worked up. So I'm trying to remember exactly what I figured out with that one. But in any case, what it kind of came down to was once I sort of realized that I'd hit a couple of ceilings for some things. So for instance, purifications and exaltations, if preliminal meter is going to wind up going in illumination at 0.7, it can't go to any higher than 6. So if I'm applying things to purifications and exaltations, if I get that skill, even though I haven't committed it, if I'm applying it any further to purifications and exaltations, it's a little bit like me putting things into pendaments and precursors. I'm getting it so that it'll be easier to build things with that skill, but it's not necessarily getting me anything I didn't already have in the Tree of Wisdoms. So one of the problems, and again, illumination's not the best example out of this, but there's a few holes in this now, because often what's happened is I've established those ceilings. Well, sorry, I've established ceilings rather than floors is the real problem here. So when I realize that purifications and exaltations is effectively at the top for that 3 to 6 range, what I'm going to be looking at is where can I apply the remaining skills to get me there. And I've also said in the past, right, Pneuma is a great opportunity to level up some of those lower level ones just because it doesn't require a lot of memories. So purifications and exaltations needs to be at 6. You'll notice it's at 6. Applebright Euphonies is at 5. You'll notice it's at 5. And even Watchman's Paradoxes, that's at 4. That's been at 4 for a long time. So by process of elimination, Meniscate Reflections winds up at 3. And this is the problem. Because it's at 2, I actually have a big gap in terms of these other ones. Now, again, because we're where we are at with Winter, I can attack this in a slightly different way. So what I do is... Actually, maybe it was the fact that I had... the Night Arts, or sorry, not Night Arts, Hushery already planned, and that's what triggered me for preliminal meter. I'm really trying to remember where that preliminal meter decision came from, but it's been one that's been informing a few follow-up decisions. So in this unique case, I could do 7 here, which would enable 6, which would then allow me to sort of move down, and likewise, and then of course do likewise moving up. But then something like Hushery is actually a little bit more challenging, because while I made the decision on Sights and Sensations, and that was again because Nyctodromy's already spoken for, I don't actually have the level 7 one yet. And in fact, that's going to be Oronoscopy, I believe. I think there's one other instance like that. But anyways, so one of the things that would be nice... and again, Illumination isn't the best example of this, but basically for any of these remaining sort of runs through the Tree of Wisdoms, because I now have Winter to work through this, it would be good for me to try and put the points in to get to the top level. So, for example, with something like Bosk, right now there's nothing going into Bosk. In fact, between Bosk and Preservation, right? So either of these are essentially taking me to the same place. So if I've got something for the top level of Bosk, I want to try and get as many of those intermediate steps taken care of as I can, specifically because I know that there's going to be... I'm going to want some extra elements of the soul. And in fact, for some of these... it means that I can get certain elements of the soul, which will be a little bit more convenient for my salons. Although, that's a whole other question. So again, it's not something that I'm not gonna sit down and spend like 2 sessions completely mapping out my plans for the Tree of Wisdoms, but it is the sort of thing that I want to keep in mind at least when it comes to deciding what skills I want to be reading the books for. And of course, the other thing that'll be nice is that when I have a salon, I'll be able to make some other choices in terms of in the salon I'll be able to bring up the floor a little bit, because I don't, unlike the other cases, I'm not making a hard decision in terms of where, like what book I'm reading. So for instance, As the Sun is Coarse, do I want to use the edge so I can finally get the Meniscate reflections to level all the way up through illumination? Well, if I do that, I cut myself off from the moon, and we've seen just how many moon things I'm going to want. So ideally I don't do that. But something like the Shaven Lock Tantra, right? How much nectar do I want? Or better still, the Book of Masks, how many heart tasks do I have in mind? So that'll be a little bit of a consideration moving forward. Anyways, we've made it to winter. I will see who the guest is before we invite anyone for the salon. But one thing I can do is, I know there's not a whole lot of harvesting to do. So at the servant's kitchen range, we will cook the joint of beef. Roast marinated beef. The jail kitchen, we will prepare the pale marrow. In Brandkrug, they take marrow seriously. This is a marrow redolent of sorrow. I guess I need potatoes, so we can use the shaft for that. These are potatoes. Spectacular. So that'll get me the game chips. And then we'll eventually want some drinks, but I can worry about that later. Or maybe not. Anyways, we'll end it there, and then for what should be Friday's episode, we will plan out... So we'll have a little bit to do with the salon. I think it's probably reasonable to say it wouldn't be a good idea for me to try and invite everybody over today. So I guess that means I wait on the lessons for tomorrow, which is fine. But that means I probably want to pick what book I want to read. And from there, make the drinks. And that's it. All right. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.